Welcome to the Alain Guillot podcast, a podcast about life, leadership, and money matters. Our guest today is Samuel Sanders. Samuel Sanders has started multiple startups, and throughout his career, he has been analyzing the idea creation process. Now he's sharing his learning with us in his book, Your Next Big Idea. Improve your creativity and problem solving. Samuel, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
So, Samuel, this last year, everyone, well, not everyone, a lot of people lost their jobs and a lot of people lost their business as well. So it was almost like a clean slate. What do I do now? What's my next big idea? And many businesses pivoted like from one day to the other, and many people fell short and they couldn't come up with a new idea, something new to create. So it was, maybe your book is a year too late. It could have helped some of those people come up with something faster, but there is always a new emergency coming up. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about your background. What makes you an expert on idea creation process?
Yeah, and what I will say to that is that during really hectic times, like oftentimes that's when new businesses come to be. They notice new problems, new things coming out. And so with the pandemic, it's been a really horrible experience for a lot of people. But from an entrepreneurial perspective, there actually were more businesses started during the pandemic than normal. So it's really a unique time to be looking to start a business. The new normal is totally changing. So it's exciting in that sense. So about me, I basically split my career into three different kind of categories. So I worked in business development for a Fortune 500 company. Here, I got to look at ideation, growing a business at a really high level for a very large company, see how they look at creativity, how they look at internal entrepreneurship, and how they look to build ideas. Another part of my career I spent working for an Inc. 5000 fastest growing company, and I was working in their R&D section along with some other just general business parts of the company. And there I got to see how a fast growing company is sitting, looking at ideation, looking how they come up with new ideas, looking how they innovate. And lastly, I've started my own companies. I started a company, Wondershirt, which created performance clothing, competing with Nike and Under Armour, and we sold clothing to Olympic athletes to help them train. And I also started a company, Herd, which helps local governments connect more effectively with citizens, as well as big businesses connect with all of their employees more effectively. So I've seen this process from entrepreneurial small business side, fast growing middle company size, and very large corporate size. And they all kind of look at it slightly differently. So I wanted to take everything, bring it together, and put it in a book so that people can actually understand how this creativity ideation process goes.
So about your background, what is it that you study, and have you always been at heart an entrepreneur, or do you have more like an employee mentality and then you shifted, or were you mostly an entrepreneur and you shifted to learn more about working in ideation in different corporations?
Yeah, so my background is in just business. I studied both finance, supply chain, and entrepreneurship. And I went just into the business world kind of looking to learn. I think I knew from a young age I always wanted to be a builder, but I just didn't really know what that looked like. It was really kind of hard to grasp. In high school, my parents were lucky enough to send me to entrepreneurship camp, which was really freaking nerdy, but I really enjoyed it. And I was 16 at that time, and it was a week-long kind of like sessions put on by Drexel, and that really kind of piqued my interest in the entrepreneurial direction. When I started my career, I wanted to, like I said, do the learning process, see how it looks at large companies, see how it looks at fast-growing small companies, but I kind of always knew my heart was more in the smaller guys. So it's important to understand and be able to think like the big corporations, but also be able to apply that down to the smaller entrepreneurial startups.
I went through the curriculum of an entrepreneurial class at the university, and they don't teach you how to be an entrepreneur. They teach you how to fill out paperwork and where to ask for loans, who to speak to. So they teach you how to tick the boxes that all the things that an entrepreneur have to learn, but they don't teach you how to become an entrepreneur. It's just like I mean, this is probably a bad example, but imagine a manual on how to be heterosexual, how to be gay. No, you are born with those ideas or those tendencies, and then you can perfect it. So I feel like, I feel like entrepreneurs are born. I think when I was a little kid, I was already seeing opportunities. Oh, this guy buy product X here at this price and he sells at that price. I could also get in the middle of that, while other people see, oh, how can I get a job working for this person? So I don't know. I think it's a mentality that is ingrained in us from a very early age. I wonder if you have a different opinion. Some people say entrepreneurs could be made, but I don't know.
Yeah. So what I will say is there are a lot of entrepreneurs that are, built up from the beginning. I think I would probably fall into that category myself. But one thing that I noticed is in the whole education process, this creativity, entrepreneurship kind of has like a haze to it, innovation too. Like people are like, oh, I want to be innovative, I want to be creative, but we don't really talk about like how to do that. And it's kind of does us a disservice. When we're looking at innovation, we talk about the big companies, we talk about Amazon, we talk about Apple, but we don't talk about like the garages they were made in or how they started. That disconnect, I think, sends people away from entrepreneurship. And some people will just look at it and be like, I'm just not creative. And that's really frustrating because I think we do have the ability to understand how to be creative. And so I think there are a good chunk of people out there that maybe would pursue entrepreneurship, but just don't really know how to find those ideas because of the way that it's kind of taught.
Okay, well, okay, now you have all these experiences. You divided your career track in 3 segments. Now, when the idea of writing this book came about?
Yeah, so I was sort of thinking about my career in general, and I was going back to my university to talk about some of my experiences and was putting together a little talk. And I realized that in this talk, I was bringing this unique perspective because most of the time they bring in entrepreneurs. This person talks so heavily about entrepreneurship in the startup, or they bring in these fast growing leaders and they're talking about growing a business, or they bring in the corporate big people. And so they talk about that, but there's no person that really kind of touches on it all. And I remember my learning experience where it was really hard to find people that talked about, okay, where do you get ideas? Like, you want to be an entrepreneur? How do you do that? How do these inventors think of those ideas? I mean, we've all looked at things and thought like, dang, I should have thought of that. And so I wanted to after talking to students and thinking about this experience as I was going through it, I decided that it made sense, to write it down, put it in a book and put my knowledge out there, and hopefully it can be helpful.
Well, I find it very helpful. I saw that you divided your book into 3 segments. And segment number 1, identifying problems. Segment number 2, erasing stigmas. And segment number 3, creating solutions. Could you briefly describe those 3 segments?
Yeah. So starting with the first section, the first thing I tell people who come to me and they have the entrepreneurial spirit, but they just don't know where to start, I say, pay attention to problems, needs, and wants. Every business is started based on solving a problem or catering to a need someone has or wants that people have. Like that would be like concerts or, going and having fun. And so it's important to pay close attention to those problems. And so when you hear people say, I hate this, or this is really annoying, those should be words that light up the brain a little bit, because then you're starting to see, oh, there's a problem there. Maybe this person would pay to solve it. can I create an idea to, maybe cater to that problem? So that's the first step, the first part of the book. It talks a lot about how to understand and where to look for those type of problems, how to come up with them. The second one is about racing stigmas. And so this is really tricky because when you're trying to innovate, we have these thought patterns that are consistent over and over. So part of the reason that is because of social influence. We look at how people do things. We assume we need to do them the same way. It could also be because of data presented a certain way, and we think that we need to do it this way. Or it could just be because we're repeating the same thing over and over again, and it just turns into a habit. A good example of this I try to explain is showering. Like, not everyone in the world showers the same amount of time, but in the United States, like, if you're not showering regularly, that all of a sudden is like, what is going on? This person is not hygienic. And so we need to challenge the stigmas around whatever problem you're looking to solve, to try and figure out if there's a kind of creative way to push the limits. Not necessarily, saying don't shower, but it's just every industry has those rules that we've just been kind of following because the people before us follow that. So it takes, the second part of the book takes the problem you're looking at and, shows you how to break down those stigmas. And that's really important in innovation. Then the next part of the book is the creation step. And so with creating, there's a lot of different things I share there, but when you're doing creation, it's important to feasibility check while you're creating. So check to make sure there's a market for the idea. Check to make sure the market wants it now. Check to make sure you do your appropriate market research, and also share. So often I hear young, people that want to start, or even older people that want to start businesses being like, I don't want my idea stolen. And I tell them, well, if you're not going to get any feedback on your idea, then it's not going to be able to develop. So getting out there and sharing. And then we talk a little bit about how to create solutions in unique ways, some common strategies that people use, something like combining different ideas together, how to go about doing that. What does a solution look like? And putting it all together at the end of the book, we talk about the full process, how you go from, I don't know what to start, to, hey, this is how, I would come up with my big idea.
Well, okay. So I see your book as step number one in the entrepreneurial process. I mean, you cannot create a business if you don't have an idea. And just to highlight, the idea doesn't have to be something completely original, something that no one have ever done before. Yeah. You could just take somebody else's idea and just add your personal touch or your personal whatever. Take a So that's the first thing. But then after that, the second step is implementing an idea. And I feel like many people could have many ideas, but then, to, let's say, getting some capital, let's start with $5,000 loan to get your idea off the ground, or putting your own savings on the line. I feel like many people, that's where they stop, like, oh, I have great ideas, but I'm too afraid to put them into practice.
Yeah. And there are a couple of things I would say about that. The first is entrepreneurship. So once you have your idea, and this is now moving beyond, like, towards step 2 after the book, it's all about calculated risk. So there has to be some kind of risk that you're willing to take on. There's often this, like with a job, it's continual paychecks every, 2 weeks, every month, whatever it is. And it's more guaranteed. Granted, you could lose your job, but especially now, but it feels safer. If you're putting yourself out there, there's more risk to it. But what I tell people is that you're more in control of this risk. You can try and either mitigate it. You can work at nighttime and, like, try and moonlight your business. You can do all different types of things to mitigate the risk. In terms of financing, like, the big thing that we joke around is go for the 3 F's: friends, family, and fools. And that's how you usually get your first start of financing. And then also, putting your own money on the line is something you do. And it's all about that risk taking. So someone who's more risky might be willing to put their own money on the line. Someone who's a little less risky may want to go for outside funding, angel investors, all of that stuff. And so that's just going to dictate the starting path for where you go.
Wow. Okay. And then after that, once you get something started, I tell you where I fall short as an entrepreneur is on the scaling part. I have started so many things, but then I feel like I have some mental limitation that doesn't allow me to scale up. And I have been in photography business. I have been owner of dance schools. I have been in real estate. I have been in investment. And once I reach a certain level, it feels like I'm too afraid to take the next step.
Yeah.
Sometimes I dismantle and start something new. But yeah, how can you help me level up?
Yeah. So I'm just going to put this out here. Scaling is scary, and it's scary for a couple of different reasons. One, if you're starting to bring on more employees, really try and like scale up in that direction in terms of like the HR internal side. Now you have all of these people's careers that are depending on you. And that's something that's really, can be really frightening. Not every business needs to scale and become the next big thing. There are a lot of family businesses that do just totally fine and they, pay the bills and people are really happy. If you are looking to scale, then what really needs to happen is you need to use your customers as your scaling method. So if you have really raving reviews for your dance studio, do a promotion where you bring in a friend, really try and use the customers in any way you can. Testimonials. There are only a small percentage of people that are willing to be early adopters and really early innovators to hop onto something. But once more and more people are willing to hop on and you can use that credibility, that's like where the scaling happens. And the magic is in building that credibility, then using it, building it a little more, using it and moving it up a little bit. So it's really big on keeping customers both happy, but then also, building those relationships to use them to help build.
Yeah, and and then some of the heroes of entrepreneurship that I follow, I think they have certain bravado that I don't think I will ever have. For example, let's say Adam Newman, who took a simple idea of the WeWork, or taking a big space and transforming it into small offices that people could rent. I mean, the idea is nothing revolutionary, but he had the guts to borrow billions of dollars to expand that. I mean, that to think of who has the guts to go and say, hey, lend me $1 billion, I'm going to change the whole real estate industry. Or Travis Kalanick, lend me $1 billion, I'm going to start Uber. I mean, the idea of Uber now in retrospect, it seems like a simple idea, but to have the guts to scale it up to this magnitude. And I don't know, Brian Chesky from Airbnb, hey, I have this idea. No, I just don't want to rent 10 apartments. I just want to rent all the apartments in the freaking universe. And yeah, so I mean, you probably don't have, yeah, what's your opinion on having this bravado or have this long-term big vision to take an idea to such a high level?
Yeah. So one thing I will say is that a lot of entrepreneurs have that big vision, but it doesn't necessarily need to be like an extroverted type of thing. There are a lot of really successful introverted entrepreneurs. The direction that like you need to have some sort of direction if you're going to want to keep scaling. And that's really important, because when you look at some family lifestyle businesses, if it's like, say you run a local spice shop or like, something like that, or, you may just be like, hey, does this, build enough profit for me? And that's okay. If you want to, then there are certain people that want to look at this and be like, okay, no, this is not enough. I want to be a chain and, or a franchise and move and have bigger ideas. And so what I say about that bravado is the people that have that bravado are continually looking through the innovation process as they go. So they're like, as they have like one of these, milestones, say like a successful, spice shop, dance studio, whatever, they're looking at, okay, how can we innovate this even further? How can we go back? And they're still hitting that ideation process as they're going forward, and they're looking at what can this turn into? How can I really add a lot of value? And then, going and borrowing and, building and scaling on that level is where that happens. And, just being honest, there are a lot of people that you named that are really successful, but there are also a lot of people that try it and it does not work. So, it's a risk, and it's a calculated risk, and it becomes even more more challenging when you're in that comfort zone, when you're like, okay, this is working, why challenge something that's working? But that's when you can really push the innovation curve, when you really are like, oh wait, this is working, but it could work even better. That's when I like want to start, reaching out, going for that scaling method.
Yeah, and I guess also depends on the lifestyle that you want and the kind of thing that you enjoy. For example, let's say that I love baking cakes, so I could start a small business where I bake 20 cakes per week and I'm happy because that's what I want to do. Or I could open a chain of bakeries and now I'm an administrator, which is not exactly what makes me happy. What makes me happy is to making little cakes for birthday parties or whatever. So and there's room for all of us, for the person who wants to be an administrator or the person who wants to be a small local business, entrepreneur, retailer, whatever kind of service that they want to offer.
Yeah, and one thing I will say about scaling is oftentimes when we think of scaling, we think bigger, and that's not always the case. Like for your cake example, like someone could launch a really successful cookbook, a cake book, but that's like not exactly the same type of scaling as like growing up a large chain that's kind of lateral. And there are a lot of companies that successfully do this kind of lateral scaling where it's similar, but it's not exactly the same. And so make sure you keep an open mind to all the different scaling opportunities. Like a great example of this is Nintendo. Like they started as a card company. They made rice. Like they've done really crazy things in their history. Now they're mainly video game company, but they did a lot of lateral scaling to survive and stay successful.
Okay, so Samuel, can you give the listeners one or two exercises that they can do in order to develop the idea creation muscle?
Yeah. So one of the things I tell people when you're brainstorming or you're trying to be creative is imagine you're an alien. So when you're an alien, you would say you're first coming to Earth and you have no idea what is going on and you see this problem. What kind of questions would you ask? What kind of things would you challenge? Why would you, like where would you be looking and what would you, feel uncomfortable with? When we're so used to just doing the routine of life that sometimes when we put ourselves in the mind space of, okay, now I'm brand new, how would I look at this? That can really spur a lot of creativity. That's just one example. In the book, we actually have tons of different exercises to help spur creativity. I don't want to give too many of them away, but basically there's with each section we talk about different exercises to help reinforce that. And I think that's important because not everybody learns in the same way. Some people are really great at just reading information, taking it in and applying it, but that's not everyone. And so that's something that was of a lot of value. But one of my favorites is that alien one because it really surprises people because you don't think like a newcomer very often. You don't put yourself in situations where you're a newcomer very often, or at least most people, some people do. And so it really triggers that creativity.
I think at the beginning of the book, and now I don't remember, you mentioned that you were taking a class and the instructor told you that you had to create X amount of idea by the end of the semester. Can you elaborate more on that exercise? I think it was very useful.
Oh yeah. Okay. So when I was way back, when I was in college, there was a professor that I write about in the book that talked about coming up with 100 ideas a week. And when you first hear that, it's incredibly daunting. 100 is a huge amount of numbers. When I first started the exercise, I was like, okay, let me scroll through my phone, all of my notes, every idea I've already had, and then just like plug it in for the exercise for school. But what I started to realize that it's not totally impossible. You can come up with 100 ideas a week. And the important way to do that is by looking at those problems, really getting good at noticing those problems, looking at the stigmas, and then really creating a lot of solutions. A lot of people just see a problem, immediately want to solve it, and are done. But that's not really the best way to look at it. Create a lot of different solutions. Then you can play around with them, mix them together, and combine them in different ways to create new ideas. And that's where you're able to get 100 different ideas a week. So it really came down to, can I notice 10 problems throughout the week, 10 things that annoy me, or 10 things that I really didn't like? Yeah, sure. And then can I create 10 different kind of solutions together? And you can scale up to get to be able to find 100 ideas a week yourself.
Yeah, I like that technique because that's the technique that I used to write blog posts in my blog.
Yeah, like, there you go.
I have my little notebook and I write, okay, different topics or conversations that I can use as a blog post. And it just continues, the mind continues running. Even when you are watching a movie or just hanging out with friends, it is somehow in your subconscious that, searching for new ideas, in my case, to write for my blog post, but for a future entrepreneur to use as an entrepreneurial startup or something.
Yeah. And I think that's like, it was a really great lesson to get at such a young age, because it really changed my opinion about the creativity process, that you can go for that maximum quantity if you want to. And then after you get that maximum quantity, if you're looking to pursue, then you funnel it down, you get the quality, you really mix. And it's important to get, your ideas out there and write them down. We have so many thoughts a day. So it's important to write them down and, really get out there. And then you can take it and kind of work and funnel it down to what you think will work.
Well, Samuel, in this world where a lot of people are shifting from a regular job to entrepreneurial, I think it's a very timing topic conversation. I wonder if you could tell the listeners one more time the title of the book and where they can follow you.
Yeah, so the title of the book is Your Next Big Idea. If you go to yournextbigideabook.com, you can find all of the places that you can purchase the book. And then from there, you can see the different types of socials to follow me on and, share, so I can continue to share with anyone who's interested. If you're interested in contacting me, my email is sam@yournextbigideabook.com. I love hearing from people, so feel free to shoot me an email. And if you're interested, check out the book.
Yeah, can you show the book one more time? I thought the cover was very pretty.
Let's do it here. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, congratulations to the designer. I think that's a very nice cover. Well, Samuel, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a really great conversation. Thank you.